Welcome to Tales from the Bridge. This is a really fun episode. We all really enjoyed the book Red Rising that we read this month. Be sure to stick around to find out what book we read next because it's a bit controversial. Some people love it, some people don't. We also have a very good conversation about the new children's show, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kinda kidding. But that's coming up soon. Let's get started with some science fiction, science fact, and stick around to the end for some trivia. Alright, let's make our way over to the bridge.
I was pleasantly surprised. I was attending a virtual conference over this past week, and the person who was closing out the conference was a gentleman named Colonel Chris Hatfield, who's a Canadian astronaut, and I think he's a pretty prolific speaker these days. He kind of does the speaking tour, and I wasn't actually going to listen to it all because I've seen him talk. I've seen his YouTube videos, and I feel like, I don't know, maybe he's gotten more airtime than he needs. But oh man, he was a good speaker, and he had a couple really interesting things to say that I had no idea about. The first thing related to recruitment of astronauts, and you guys may know this. Marty, you might know because I know your daughter's interested in astronauting, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's like they have the selection ratio is astounding. In December of last year, they chose 10 new astronauts from a pool of over 12,000 candidates, and they only do that once every 4 years or so. So, wow. 10 new astronauts in 4 years, and they just started their training. So in the last couple of months, these 10 new astronauts have just started their training. But this blew my mind. Is their training consists of 5 things: operation and maintenance of the International Space Station, training for spacewalks, as you might imagine, developing complex robotic skills, safely operating a T-38 training jet, and Russian language skills. And I would say at least, I know, 2 or 3 of these things sound maybe a little outdated at this point. ISS, going to be going into the drink. Anyway, it sounds outdated to me. I feel like this is very 1980s style astronaut stuff.
Yeah, and this is the Canadian Space Agency specifically?
No, this is NASA.
Oh, this is NASA. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay. We don't recruit nearly that many astronauts. We recruit like 2 every 10 years.
Yeah,
in
Canada. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
But I mean, the largest space agency in the world, and they recruit 10 every 4 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think the Russian language skills are probably out, and if they're and this whole ISS maintenance, that's going to have to change, right? I'd be interested to know what priorities they're going to be shifting to.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised it's that specific. Like, I would have thought it'd be more like, spacewalks for sure. So they're training in pools and stuff, right? Like in the equipment and the spacesuits, and I imagine flying a fighter jet. Though I'm surprised they make there's some guys up there that are never going to be pilots. They go up there to do science experiments. It's sort of weird to be training your chemists to fly fighter jets, when that's not really what they're ever going to be doing.
Yeah.
It's a little weird.
Especially with, like, if you think about, if they're going up in the Dragon crew capsule on SpaceX a lot of the time, or the new Boeing, what do they call it? Skyliner or something liner. Either one of those are automated as far as I understand. So I presume you might need to be there to pilot it if there's something goes wrong, but I think it's pretty much all automated. Chris Hadfield was talking about he had to do stuff on takeoff to the point where he had to lift his head off under 6 Gs to try to be able to see the instrumentation to figure out what was happening.
Oh, wow.
I don't know, but these days, apparently that's not the case. So maybe they don't need all this flight training. I mean, I really don't know what I'm talking about, but
maybe there's transferable skills, the things that you would learn as a pilot that, and maybe just the sensation of flight and getting into orbit in the first place. Maybe there's just enough going on there that they go, well, we still want you to be able to fly and calculate fuel consumption and not barf in your helmet. I don't know.
No, that's true. Like, it's about spatial orientation and like being able to like know where your body is and with respect to 3 dimensions. And I suppose it's like the best they can do to get oriented and what it's like to be flying in space.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, anyway, that'd be the fun part. I mean, I wouldn't
like,
mind learning how to fly a jet.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Well, that's that whole idea of not barfing. I think that's a really big deal. Both under heavy G and under no G, those two things can cause the barfs.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what else he said? He was talking a little bit about NASA. You know how NASA has really shifted back to wanting to go to the moon. In fact, they've contracted SpaceX to fly their Starship, if and when it ever gets up and running, to go and land on the moon and bring people there and bring people back. And he explained why, which I didn't really understand, because I was like, well, we've been to the moon. It's a big, dry, cold rock. What's the big deal? And he said, if you go to the poles, and I'm not sure if it's both of the poles, maybe it is. He said, one, there's always sun there. So if you're standing at the top of a crater, the sun basically goes around you because it's rotating. So you can always have good solar power unencumbered by atmosphere. So you have lots of power. But crucially, at the bottom of those craters, there's a whole crap ton of water ice. So, and I had heard that there was some water ice. They'd found water ice on the moon, and but apparently there's like the equivalent of the mass of Lake Huron, one of the Great Lakes in the middle of North America, Lake Huron, on the poles of the moon. So that could be propellant. You could use that stuff for all sorts of different things if you needed to.
Yeah.
So that's why they're talking about making a nice base on one of the poles of the moon because of that.
Wow. I didn't know that. Yeah, I guess you can use the solar power to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then you've got like very strong rocket fuel, but also just, battery power, hydrogen power.
Neat. Drink this stuff too.
You could even drink it.
Yeah. Well, it just makes a lot of sense in terms of accessibility, right? Like getting back and forth, learning how to live in a new environment, a hazardous environment. Like people talk about Mars all the time, but I mean, we got something right next door, and you can figure out a lot of stuff that's probably useful elsewhere in other sort of ventures in space. I make a lot of sense. I want a moon base. I mean, come on, who doesn't want a moon base?
Yeah, especially with some evil folk, some dystopian antagonist needs to have a base on the moon.
Absolutely. I want like some sort of fascist takeover or a robot overlord situation. Like I kind of,
or maybe, the iron golds that we're about to be talking about.
Yes.
Taking over the moon and then using the moon as the base to take over the Earth. Anyway, this plays right into the book we're going to talk about. The government, basically, right? The powers that be are the capital is basically Luna, right? In Red Rising, I think.
Red Rising,
the capital of the solar system, as it were.
Yeah,
I think you guys are being way too ambitious with the moon. Have you read Stevenson's Seven Eves?
Oh yeah, that was good.
Yeah, but that was 700 pages of disaster. Hopefully, I mean, well-written disaster, not a literary disaster, just an actual plot that is a disaster.
Yeah, I think the moon blows up in the first sentence of that book, or has blown up. Yeah, I gotta say, I really like Chris Hadfield. I think he's making space interesting for young people. He's something that's cool about him is he's kind of like your friend's dad that thinks he's cool but still like dweeby cool, who breaks out his guitar at the fireplace and like plays a 70s tune that's like, oh my god, Dad. But he still like manages to like come across pretty cool. He's an advocate for some pretty progressive modern things. And I think that he's doing some good stuff. And the fact that he's Canadian is very neat, because if you think of some of the most popular astronauts in the last couple of decades, Chris Hadfield would be one of them, if not the most popular.
I agree. And he rocks a mustache and has done so for decades.
Very much so. That's where the 70s guitar riffs come from, the mustache.
So the book that we read this month was called Red Rising by Pierce Brown. And this was the first book in a series. It was the first book in a trilogy, which then became a series of 6 books. And it has been labeled somewhere as young adult, and you could almost perceive that it's young adult because the protagonist is 16 years of age, which is unbelievable given what happens in the books. But apart from that, this is not a young adult book. I mean, it's pretty darn graphic and dark, and super exciting. But anyway, it was a great book. Marty had been talking about it, and I think Sam and Tristan, you guys had been mentioning it to me as well. So I thought it would be a good pick. And yeah, it was super exciting. So just quickly, it's a dystopian future. There's a caste system where the caste system is born out through genetics, where the different castes are actually bred to do different things. It's a non-faster than light futuristic sci-fi, so everything happens within our solar system. So you've got colonized Mars and Venus and the moon, etc. Anyway, and very dark, but it's all about the characters, and it's all about the action. Yeah, I won't say anything else. So I want to hear what you guys thought of it.
Yeah. Well, maybe since I'm its biggest fanboy, I'll jump in. I love this book. I read it a while ago, and I read the rest of the trilogy, and I spent the last month reading the Iron Gold, which is actually sort of the 4th book. It's the first book of the 2nd trilogy, and it's just as great. Now, I do want to address the young adult thing. Like, I didn't really know that or think of it as a young adult book any more than maybe I would think of. Well, but I realize now it is something about the writing that makes it that, like, it's dark, it's very violent. It's like Hunger Games, though, right? And you'd consider Hunger Games young adult. Kids love that stuff these days, right? I think, but I think it's just that it's not too long. It's like maybe 300 pages, and it's just jam packed with plot and action, right? Like, that's the thing I think I realized in Iron Gold, the 4th book, right? So he writes this trilogy first. Red Rising, Golden Sun, and Morning Star. And, they get a little longer, but they're still, under 400 pages. And these books are just like, they're just jam-packed with, like, page-turning bliss. It's great. It's a New York Times bestseller for a reason. And because that's the kind of book that becomes a bestseller, right? It just, like, it's full of action. It's full of intrigue, plot, politics, revenge and betrayal. There's and I think that's the appeal, right? Is that the characters are so vivid, and there's just a lot of drama, right? Like fighting bloody wars and avenging the death of your father and family kind of drama, and hey, that's great. I love that kind of thing. It's like an injection in your reading veins to just like, okay, I'm just going to devour this book. So I loved it. I love the rest of the trilogy. The 2nd book I thought was amazing. I give it a perfect 10 for some of the scenes in it. And what I also love about it is that you can sort of see Pierce Brown. This is Pierce Brown's first book, Red Rising, right? It's just like a runaway bestseller. This guy wrote his first book. It was spectacular success, has a cult following. And you can just really see him grow and grow and grow. In the 2nd book, it's a lot like the first, but better. And you can see this guy sort of finding his craft. And the 3rd book is just a beautiful climax, right? And he really wraps the whole thing up. So I kind of like that. You get to follow this writer as he develops his craft, starting with this book. And it was such a successful start that yeah, I love it. I mean, it's been rare for me this year to read something that didn't feel a little bit like work, and none of Pierce Brown's books feel like work to me. They're just like straight up candy. Just collapse in bed, read for an hour or 2 or 3 if I can get away with it. Like, it's just one of those really enjoyable reads. So good book for the summer, especially. Take this on a plane or a beach, or if you're gonna or a Christmas reading. I think I read it originally over like a Christmas break where you have lots of time. So yeah, loved it.
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. Like, you've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune in to 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
I really enjoyed it too. I would kind of describe it as like young adult, sure, but also a kind of political sci-fi, in a sense that I think is very applicable to our time. You know, you have this sort of misinformation element and this sort of subterfuge of the higher caste over the lower castes, and it has some elements that definitely reminded me of the Hunger Games at one point. But it's a much larger world, and I get the sense that the following books leave any comparison to that trilogy behind, which is maybe perhaps what Hunger Games should have done. You know, it could be because it's young adult, it could be a little heavy-handed at times. But once you kind of settle into the style, the book continues to get better as you go. I think about like midway through, I wasn't like 100% sure that I was going to read the entire series, but by the end of it, I was convinced that I am going to read the entire series. So, and that's sort of how I felt. It really kind of grew on me. Yeah, it's fun. It's exciting. It covers a lot of sort of politically oriented elements that I like, and I really enjoyed it. It just got fun, and it's funny how you start cheering. I don't do this often, but like I was definitely rooting for, you know, the main character, and kind of by the end of it, kind of pretty excited at how things sort of panned out at the end. I know you're well into these books, Marty, but anyways, if you remember back, I mean, there's a great big fun battle scene, and it's a sci-fi that manages to use a lot of low tech stuff as well. You know, like some of the big battles happen with bows and arrows and spears, right? Like, so that's kind of cool. Like, there's a lot of different elements and a lot to hang your hat on here. And I definitely recommend.
Yeah, I enjoyed this very much as well. And I've read the first two. And yes, Golden Sun, the second book, is everything you want by the time you get to the end of the first book. But I don't want to talk too much about that second book, because you will get into it after you've read the first one, Red Rising. I will say though, I do remember, because I read Red Rising a while ago, and once Kevin said we were reading Red Rising this month, that's when I picked up the second book. But I do specifically remember in the first couple of chapters of Red Rising, I was a little bit like, really? Like, this is getting all these reviews? And like, I don't know, the writing's a bit like, I don't know. And I kept with it for a couple chapters, and then something big happens by the second or third chapter and then you realize that you're okay. I think I get what this book is going to do. I don't want to put that against it, that the way that I felt in the first couple of chapters, because once it gets going, you're all in. And just because we didn't talk too much about the story, and I don't think it's much of a spoiler, the entire first book is just a test for these young golds. They're just testing each other. They're being tested by the iron golds, right? They're their parents, more or less, and the family houses, and they all need to find out where they're best suited as adults out there in the real world, and the world being the solar system, more or less. And I don't know, is that too much of a spoiler, guys?
No, I think we should even say more.
Yeah, but it's so the story is really just like one big test almost. And I did not read the Hunger Games, but I get the comparison because I know the story of the Hunger Games. But it's one big, it's almost school, right? It's education.
It is school, yeah. Well, it's like finishing school for brutal, vicious killers that actually run the government.
Yeah,
in a sense,
and
right?
but
Like,
you're being, but obviously
they're there to like pit them against each other and see who wins, right? Like half of them are going to die, and the half that come out become the peerless scarred, and that's like, you know, the mark that you get that makes you worthy of governing the lower castes, lower colors in this case. Yeah,
right. But you definitely you love the characters because those that align, or I should say, those that become allies of our main character, Darrow. Um, you care about Darrow because something happens to him at the beginning of the book, and it's something that you can say, yeah, I want you to get revenge, Darrow. And every ally that he picks up along the way, you care for. Darrow shows a lot of compassion in this test where a lot of the golds do not have compassion, and obviously that helps him a little bit, but he's also brutal and able to make harsh decisions, so you're able to get behind that as well. And you want him to kill everyone, right? You want him to like kill every single person. And the last thing I'll say about this first book, Red Rising, is the way that it ends makes you feel like this book was the first chapter. It ends in this way where you're just like, yes, I am all in on the second book. And that second book takes the world to a multitude of directions that you maybe wouldn't have guessed reading the first book, because the first book is quite simple. It's one basic story that you kind of get. And you could even say the second book is convoluted in terms of the amount of characters and the storyline, but it really expands into a total space opera science fiction story. But Red Rising, loved it. I have no idea why, because if you told me the story, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not that into that. But somehow Pierce Brown's writing style is simple and addictive. Not exactly sure why, because there's nothing that special about it, but it'll pull you along the whole way. So I'm quite impressed that it's his first book, and it was this enjoyable, and it's also great for everyone. I've seen it, like you said, there's a cult following, and I've heard a lot of different people from different from young and older, and just it seems like an inclusive book that everyone just gets behind the main character because you want some revenge on the really bad dudes, and you kind of get it. And I hope Marty's read more than all of us, but I hope we get our revenge, because I want these people dead.
Well, I mean, a part of the broad appeal of it too is you keep hearing this analogy of it being kind of like Hunger Games, and it isn't, like you said. But I think the reason that it is, people talk about that, is because it's kids killing kids, right? Teenagers killing. It's like kind of Lord of the Flies. The adults are stepping away, allowing the kids to do what they need to do, and it's brutal, and you can put yourself in there, and that almost paints it with an even more dystopian. Well, it really does, a more dystopian paintbrush, because these are kids, and they're training them to be these killers, as you said, these killers that are going to be ruling the solar system, and that's just pure nastiness. But one thing that I picked up on partway through the book that might speak to, Tristan, why it seems so appealing, is a lot of us really like these stories where the protagonist is just almost always going to win. For anybody who's ever, like 007 style, Bond is always going to get it right. He's always going to get the lady, and he's always going to be the suave dude. And there'll be problems, and there'll be hiccups. But Darrow, things pretty much always went his way, except when they didn't. But most of the time they did. And he's this big, powerful guy, very smart, tends to outscore everybody on intelligence tests and things like that. It's almost like, do you guys remember In the Name of the Wind, the fantasy book, the protagonist Kvothe, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. But Darrow reminded me a lot of Kvothe, because they both were these, they could do anything. They were so capable at anything that they tried. And a lot of people really like that, these super capable protagonists.
But it's important, I think, that he came from the bottom, right? You don't cheer him on because he's smart. You cheer him on because he came from the bottom. He was underprivileged. He was a red, in the mines, and they found this one particularly talented guy to put into the position that he was put into to try to run, create a revolution. And so you can cheer for him because he's an underdog in the first place, right? And it's great, of course, he needs these great talents to be better than everybody else. But part of why he's better too, and I think that's the emotional resonance here is that he has empathy and he works. It's all about trust, right? Like he's all about who can he trust, and ultimately forgiving people that have betrayed him, right? He's got heart, and that's why I think he's a hero. Like, you can really get behind this character. He makes sacrifices. He's always kind of got the good goal in mind, right? And
the love,
but
right?
and the love, right? And yeah, like, he really pulls on your heartstrings. Now, the beautiful thing I'll say that Pierce Brown does with this character, right, is he starts him at the bottom of the first book, and he rises and and triumph, and he goes through hardship, and ultimately there is a triumph. And then in the second book, he finds a way to just boom, drop him down again, right? Like, status down. So it doesn't continue to be triumphalist, right? At the beginning of every book, and maybe a couple times, in fact, during the books, right, Darrow is knocked down again, and he loses, what he has gained. And there's always he starts again from the bottom. And so that's the cycle, I think, that creates the drama and the the interest in this character and love for this character that I have, and I think a lot of people have.
Well, something that blows my mind about these books too is just that and I kind of said this before, but if you heard the story, if someone just described the story, you'd say, okay, I've heard that, I've seen that before, I've read the story before, I don't need to. But I'm really kind of I cannot put my finger on it, what it is that makes me emotionally attached to these characters. Somehow Brown, when something good happens, when the good guys do something, even though you knew it was going to happen and the good guys win, you're still like, I was a little bit emotional, just like, oh my God, we did it. And like, I just can't really describe what it is. It's a really tricky one.
Yeah.
Well, one in the first one in particular, they the idea of the kids bettering the adults, that, and I won't go in beyond that, but that was kind of impactful, especially because you've empathized with these folks going through this terrible circumstance, and suddenly they are able to beat their torturers. So certainly for me, I felt like that was really impactful.
Cool.
Fantastic pick.
Great pick, Kevin.
All right, let's do
let's do this.
Let's do a what we're watching, and it's got to be Star Wars. And this is for Tristan, our big Star Wars super fan.
Almost reluctant fan.
I love Star Wars dearly, and it's easy to, I know, make it sound like I am the curmudgeon when it comes to these new ones. I apologize, guys, but yeah,
you just don't like Star Wars TV. You like Star Wars movies, but the whole TV format just doesn't do it for you, huh?
I like the original trilogy. I don't know. And I like the prequels a bit because they've become nostalgic. And then the new movies, it's okay. They're good movies. But tell me how good they are, please. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you that I liked. We started watching the Obi-Wan series this past week, and my wife's complaint was that it reminded her of three movies she hated, which were the prequels, and it does force you to engage with three crappy films. But for me, it fills a gap that I wanted filled. There's a story to be told there. Like, Obi-Wan Kenobi was on Tatooine, looking over Luke Skywalker. What brought him there? What happened during that gap of time? That's a totally reasonable story. Yeah. And yeah, I gotta we gotta get back into sort of George Lucas's dialogue now and again from the prequels, but I'm kind of into it. That's a story I wanted told. I liked Ewan McGregor as a Jedi. I liked his character as Obi-Wan and him playing that role. So I'm happy to see him reprise that, and I'm happy to sort of see a bit of redemption maybe happen with that piece of the storyline in I got it again. I say this fills a gap in the timeline that I'm kind of into, and I wouldn't have thought of, and I'm glad they did, and I'm glad they're revisiting it. And there's plenty. The thing is, the strength with, I think, a TV series over the movies is you get one shot at doing it, good or bad, right? So if you don't like, they put out a movie, you can't go back, if it sucks. It's a one-off painting, and that's it. But with a TV series, you're kind of in that printmaker effect, whereas you can iterate and evolve the show. You can take input, you can take that criticism, you can steer it in a new direction, and there's an opportunity to improve upon things there. And so my hope is that it's a short run mini series, which is totally makes sense. I kind of like that about it, and there's a chance here to sort of, like I say, redeem things a little bit. And I think there's a lot of strength to the sort of live action TV revisiting of Star Wars, because, like I say, like you can steer it as you go, and bring in new directors and new writers, and keep it thriving. Anyways, that's my take on it. I recommend watching it. The first two were great, and it was fun.
Well, and Leia, right? So in terms of the plot, being able to explore what happened with Leia, because she was not explored much in the original movies, and here it appears as though she is being so. So we get to see her early life, and that, so it's filling that gap as well, which is going to be exciting. And I don't know about Luke, because Luke, you see him a little bit in the background in one of the episodes, but who knows what's going to happen in the rest of the series. Maybe he'll be explored in his early life as well. But obviously Leia is a big part of this one. So that's cool. And Ewan McGregor, I don't know about you guys, but I love Ewan McGregor. And it's not necessarily because of the Star Wars movies. It's because I just associate him with BMW 1200 GS motorcycles, because he was in The Long Way Round and The Long Way Down, and I watched every single one of those. And so I see him and I'm like, Ewan, yeah, you the man. And of course here he's playing Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I'm like, all right, I'll put up with that. But I like him. He just seems like a very genuine Obi-Wan, and cool guy.
Well, he's always from Trainspotting to me, right? He was in.
Yeah.
That's what I see as Ewan McGregor, which gives him a whole lot of street cred and a whole lot of love, and like he's just an amazing actor. And I think I love that he took that grit of those movies, right, and then brought that a little bit into Star Wars, which would be too shiny and polished, right? Like if it wasn't an actor that had a little bit of that background. He's great. I love that guy, and I love the series too. I got to say, I love the first two. I mean, I loved that when they set up these resonances, right? And we knew when episode 1 came out, right, of the prequel trilogy, we were like, oh, it's a 10-year-old boy. It's little Anakin. And now we're going to get the story of little Anakin and da, 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 da. And so with this series, they clearly, they tease you that and like, oh, look, it's 10-year-old Luke. And now we're going to do, it's the next generation, except it's like they always put every generation of movies, they set up this sort of similar story. And now we're going to see the early life of Luke. But then we don't. We actually see Leia, which is beautiful. I love that they did that. It was almost like a bait and switch, right? Like they sort of tease you out with 10-year-old Luke, and they're like, aha, actually the story is about 10-year-old Leia. And that's beautiful, and it's totally time for that. And I think it makes a big statement that the female characters were ignored and are just as important and just as powerful, and it's a great time to see her story. So hey man, I'm all in. I think I thought it was really well made, as good or better than the Mandalorian, the first season. Lots of nostalgia, lots of things I want to see, right? And seeing exactly what you were saying, Sam. This part of the timeline is the death of the Jedi, right? It's the Jedi hiding. They're being exterminated by what became of the Jedi, and because of the Empire. And so it's a really, like, I don't know, heart wrenching part of the timeline, right, where you're sort of seeing them have to hide after all they did, and there was this glorious monk order that has fallen and been destroyed. And anyway, I think it's a great story. I can't wait to watch the rest of it.
I agree with every single thing you guys said, except for one thing, and that is that the first 2 episodes of Obi-Wan were good. So, and honestly, if you think about everything you guys said, I'm not joking. I agree with you guys completely. I love Ewan McGregor. I think he's a fantastic actor and person. He's so likable. He was great as Obi-Wan. My favorite part about the Obi-Wan is the TV series is Flea. Like Flea, the bass player from Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like, he's amazing. I love that guy. I think the story is good. I think everything is there that I want to see. However, I just thought it was actually filmed very poorly. It was so, yeah, there's good shots. The cinematography is not bad and stuff like that. But did you guys see the action sequence when little Leia was being chased by those 3 guys at the beginning in that first episode?
That was pretty
I'm
cheesy.
sorry.
I
That
agree.
was terrible. Absolutely terrible. She's running and they're tripping over. It was just like lazy. All of the action sequences were. It just seemed lazy. Even the little bit of lightsaber stuff. So I don't know. So I'm being. I've already got a thing with the Star Wars Disney thing because there's been so much that has come out so quickly. So I think I'm a bit tired. Remember when they were on that city planet that looked just like Coruscant? And Leia runs away because she's like, "No, they're all trying to chase you, so I'm gonna run away." And she runs away, and he's like, "Get back here!" And like he's like bumping it, like it was just like, "Oh, I can't catch this little tiny child. She's just running. She runs so slow." And he's like this Jedi that's like, I missed you again. It's just like, okay, like I want to love you, Obi-Wan, because you're Ewan, and I love Obi-Wan Kenobi's one of the best characters in Star Wars. But when you do little scenes like that, I'm like, yeah, like what are you guys? I'm here with you. I want to.
by the neck and like, you know, like I
No,
gotta say,
the scenes need to be filmed in a way that actually shows you that he was like
that she got away.
it just needs to be filmed better. Like it, this is happening with a lot. Like, do you guys remember the lightsaber scene between Mace Windu and Palpatine just before he turns into Sidious? You guys remember that scene? It is the craziest, worst sword fight of all time. It's just close-ups of their face going like, oh, and it's just like that's. It felt like that, where it was just like, okay, so we're not actually choreographing any good fights here. We're just like showing close-ups of faces with lightsabers zipping by. I love Star Wars. I'm ending on that note. I love Star Wars. I'm with you. I will continue watching. I'll give everything a shot. But yeah, I can't say anymore. I and you guys aren't wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying with these series and stuff like that, I'm gonna have to. I'll take it as I can. I love the original series, but you guys, if you're enjoying it, that's amazing. That's awesome. You're enjoying these new Star Wars shows. That's a dream come true.
One thing
I wish I could be like you.
Yeah,
well, I will like to invite our viewers to check out our email link and to send hate mail as much as you like to Tristan at TFTB, and we're excited to see what you got to say for him.
Guys, you're gonna hate me.
Oh, why? What are we reading?
Oh my God! You're gonna. You guys are gonna hate me.
Oh,
this might be the end of the show.
It's gonna be Banks, isn't it?
Oh, fuck.
This is where we're going.
It's
I just dealt with it. You haven't told me anything.
Come on.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. I have this all taken care of.
Yeah, sure.
We are reading Ian M. Banks's The Player of Games.
Woohoo!
All right.
Kevin, high five.
High five.
Now we've got to talk about this a little bit because for those who don't know kind of the relationship we've had with Ian M. Banks is we did read Accession by Ian M. Banks when we first started meeting to talk about books and read books. So that was a couple of years ago. And Kevin brought the book. It was his recommendation. It was my first Ian M. Banks book, and it was actually one that I was planning on reading next. So we read Accession, and I was blown away. The writing was just amazing. I loved how the story was just. I just loved that book. Marty and Sam did not. It's kind of been an ongoing joke because Banks has been considered one of the great science fiction writers of our time, and he started writing science fiction in the 80s, the Culture series. The first book was Consider Phlebas, and that's one of the weaker books. So if you want to get into the series, you don't need to start with the first one, Consider Phlebas. You can really start with this one that we're reading right now. I do believe it's the second novel in the Culture series. And with the Culture series, it's not an ongoing story. Every book is different. There's new characters every time, but they're just all so amazing. But the reason why we're reading The Player of Games is because it is his shortest book. On top of that, many would call it his best book. And that might be because it's his shortest, so it's the easiest to digest. I'm not saying that you guys are going to go, hey, I'm in on Banks now, but I do feel you're going to soften on Banks. And I know how much Marty is so well read in so many science fiction books. There's no way that Marty gets to the end of this book and says, I still hate Banks. It's still terrible. I think he's going to, let me try that again. I hate Banks. It's terrible. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm never reading another Banks book again.
I'm happy to have him resurrected in my opinion and Sam's. I mean, I keep hearing that he is in a league of his own and nobody else writes like him, and the Culture novels will stand the test of time. And I think, I'm glad that you're doing this because I do want to read a better book by him. I do want to read this one. I've always heard good things about it. And so if we're going to read one Banks, I'm glad that we're going to do this. Let's do it.
The Player of Games is the highest rated Ian M. Banks on Goodreads as well. So others also think it's the best one. And I've read this, but I've read it like a decade ago, maybe a decade and a half ago. I don't remember anything about it. So I'm looking forward to reading it again.
Well, I'm willing to have my horizons expanded, my mind changed, and all that good stuff. So why not? I'm happy to branch out and then, be totally ruthless if it sucks.
Oh yeah, yeah. If this sucks, this is over.
Yeah,
it's over between us, Tristan.
Yeah. All right, guys. So you guys ready for some trivia?
Heck yeah!
All right.
Yeah.
So hey, the book we read this month took place on Mars, so I thought we'd test our Mars knowledge. All right.
Cool.
It's a short one this month, but I think because some of these questions get pretty hard. But we're going to start easy. What god is Mars named for?
Mars. Isn't he God?
God of War.
Yes.
God of War.
I'm looking for the Roman god of war, but you're correct. It's named for Mars, the god. So actually, yeah. That's a poorly written trivia question.
I won. I got it.
Someone should talk to our trivia guy. Clown. How many moons does Mars have, and what are their names?
I only know
3. Phobos.
That's the only
Maybe
one I
only
know.
one. Phobos.
Phobos is all I know.
Mars has 2 moons, Deimos and Phobos. But good for getting at least one of them. I wouldn't have gotten any.
Half point for Marty.
Yeah, half point for Marty here.
Well, half for Kevin too.
But I didn't get it first.
Yeah.
Jeopardy rules.
All right. So, what planet number from the sun is it?
4.
Yes. Okay. Is Mars bigger or smaller than Earth?
Smaller.
That's right. So that was Kevin got that. So smaller, but the diameter of 4,217 miles. And finally, what is Mars' gravity compared to Earth?
1/3.
Yeah, that's about right. So Mars has a very weak gravity and is 37% less than on Earth. This means that on Mars you could jump 3 times higher than on Earth.
Oh, so it's 37% less. So it's actually more like it's 63% of the gravity of Earth.
Gravity of Mars is 37% less than on Earth.
Oh, really?
Less than, yeah. Okay, so it's like, it's 2/3 ish of the gravity here. So we were both wrong. Yeah.
Oh, I kind of. All right.
I was going to
Rather than
say
a third or a fourth. It's actually
67%, but
well, you should have said it, man. You should have said it.
no, it's the delay in the technology we're
Oh,
using.
yeah. He actually said that 30 seconds ago.
Well, that's all I've got for trivia today, guys.
That's
Oh,
good.
it's great. That's good.
How about I got one?
All
What
right.
is the name of the tallest mountain in the solar system?
Olympus Mons.
On Mars. Ah,
On
that's
Mars.
good.
Yeah, good.
How many life forms have been found on Mars?
0.
All right. I'm just fishing for that one.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Rate our show, review our show, let us know what you think, give us an email, let us know if you like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Let us know if you like Ian M. Banks. Let's figure this out. Thank you so much. Until next time.